Welcome back to another episode of the Install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Greg and I were just we spent the first 10 minutes catching up. It's been so long,
I
Greg.
know.
6 weeks.
Almost, yeah, because what it was May 20th, we did the live podcast from the hotel, which
Yeah.
was, hey, I had an awesome time. It was almost 3 hours. We probably could have gone on longer. It seemed like people were excited about it, and I really enjoyed it, Buck.
No, listen, we can't thank you guys enough for coming out to the analog when you did last month and hanging out with Greg and I and so many other listeners to the podcast. We're incredibly grateful for the way that you guys have supported it, both in terms of downloads and in terms of coming out. And we hope to do more cool events like that in the future. But Greg, it's been so long since we've talked. There's a ton of stuff that's happened. Not the least of which is a wide receiver sweepstakes that the Tennessee Titans seem to be firmly entrenched in. Deandre Hopkins, at this point of his career, what do you see when you watch him on tape in that Arizona offense, understanding that his PED suspension cost him some time, but when he got back out on the field, he still found ways to be hugely productive?
Without question. I mean, he missed the first 6 games, and I think he caught close to 75 balls. I mean, don't forget, his game is not built on vertical speed. He is not a burner. Anytime he gets vertical, it's for reasons other than pure speed. And I think that he is as refined and subtle a route runner as there is in the game. I think that his ability to create just enough separation at the top of his route stem is really, really high level. We know he has great, great hands. DeAndre Hopkins reminds me of a conversation I had years ago when I interviewed Chris Carter. And I remember I asked Chris Carter about his off-season routine. And he said to me, I try to work on the things that I'm not good at. So the thing I don't work on is catching the ball, because I'm really good at that. And he was right. I mean, the way he said it, it came across, in sort of an egotistical way. But of course, great players in every sport are egotistical to a certain extent. They have to be. That's just the nature of performing at a high level. But I'll never forget Chris Carter saying that. And DeAndre Hopkins is the same. DeAndre Hopkins has great, great hands. He catches everything. He creates just enough separation. He's deceptive run after catch. In other words, you don't see him catch it and you go, wow, look at the juice that this guy has. But he's got this deceptive ability to kind of make people miss in a short space. And he's physical and he's competitive. And, obviously he'd be the kind of guy that could help a wide receiver room. He could help a quarterback, whether it's a veteran like Ryan Tannehill or a young quarterback like Will Levis. He has that understanding of the game. He's still a really productive receiver. That's what you're looking for. We can debate styles of play. That's a different question. I mean, obviously, like I said, he's not just going to run by corners, but he's a productive wide receiver who knows how to get open, knows how to run routes, can line up outside, can line up inside, understands how different receiver splits impact the way you run routes. He's just a really professional, detailed receiver.
Well, and I want to go back to that you mentioned, the run after catch, basically what he's able to do in terms of creativity with the ball in his hands, right? Like you said, Greg, he's not necessarily pulling away from people on a regular basis. He's not wowing you with his abilities in space. But I do think that there's and maybe creativity is the wrong word, but that's what comes to mind when I watch a player like that who isn't necessarily doing it in flashy, explosive ways, but does just enough to get that critical yardage.
And he's always been like that. It's funny you mention that, because in our matchup room, obviously he's played for a long time now. And when he played, obviously with Houston, they were pretty good. They were making the playoffs every year. So I was watching their tape quite a bit. That's when Bill O'Brien was there, when Deshaun Watson was there, and they were a good offense. And, I remember talking to the guys in the matchup room, because we'd all be watching tape. I have usually during the season 4 or 5 guys that work on the show. And we'd all kind of say, God, you watch DeAndre Hopkins and you never come away going, wow, that guy's great. But then the more you watch him, you kind of say, that guy's great.
That guy's great.
no, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because he doesn't look, there's no pure explosion to his game. He's not, to use a term that we use a lot in scouting, he's not sudden, but he gets open. He knows how to get open. There's there's three really important parts to playing receiver besides catching the ball. Obviously, we accept that you have to catch the ball. So think of it this way. There's three really important parts. There's getting off press coverage. If you can't get off press coverage without being disrupted with the timing of your route, the quarterback's not going to throw you the ball because it disrupts the timing. Okay. The second part is you have to be able to create separation at the top of your route stem. Okay. However you do it, some guys do it shake and bake. Some guys do it with physicality. Some guys can combine both. They're really good. However you do it, you have to create separation. And a third piece of this, which is never talked about, which DeAndre Hopkins is really good at, and usually burners are not good at this, believe it or not, is you have to have the ability to stop. Okay. If you're going to run a curl route, okay, against a corner, you can't take 6 steps to stop. You have to be able to run, plant a foot, and stop. Okay. We talk about this with corners too. They have to be able to stop, because if a guy is running vertically right at them and is going to, let's say, run a comeback or a curl or some kind of route, intermediate type route, and the corner can't stop to defend him, then it's tough to play corner in the NFL. No matter, you could be a 4-3 guy, but if you can't stop, that's a problem. And DeAndre Hopkins is really, really good at those three things. I remember back in the day the matchups he had when Jalen Ramsey was with Jacksonville. They had great one-on-one matchups. And there were times that Hopkins beat him vertically over the top because he knew how to release off the line of scrimmage, not because he was a 4-3-5 guy. If I'm not mistaken, Hopkins was a 4-5-7 or 4-5-8 guy coming out of Clemson. And most people would say that's not real fast for a wide receiver. But Hopkins can do those three things. He can defeat press, he can create needed separation at the top of his route stem, and he can stop to create, and that also helps create separation. And of course, as I said, he catches the football.
Yes, he's, just the biggest hands I think I've ever seen on a human being, DeAndre Hopkins. But I think, Greg, that when considering, the addition of personnel like DeAndre Hopkins, and certainly the Titans as a franchise have experience with taking a chance on an aging wide receiver, the way that he executes all the things that you've just laid out make me feel better about the way that kind of a game is going to age, because it's based on nuance, it's based on experience, it's based on tape study, as opposed to just pure. He obviously has athletic and physical gifts, but it's not just purely predicated on his ability to win athletically.
And the other thing that he has, because we've wired him here at NFL Films over the years, and I've seen those wires, and to use the expression that a lot of people like to use, he is a true dog. He is super, super competitive. And you want that in your wide receiver room. Everything you just said, in addition to the fact that the guy's super competitive, is going to help someone like Treylon Burks. And, because Burks has pretty big time talent. You're talking about a guy who's 6'3". Speaking of big hands, he's got big hands too. Okay. He actually has some vertical ability. He can run by people, because he's got that stride length. And that would help someone like Burks an awful lot as to what it takes, snap after snap, practice after practice, day after day, to be a high quality NFL wideout. So again, I'm not the money guy. I don't know what's in DeAndre Hopkins' head. It's been reported, he made those comments about what he's looking for with a team. A lot of that stuff's wonderful, and then money changes that a lot because, hey, and that's fine. Yeah, Hopkins should get as much as he can possibly get. He's 31 years old. He's not going to sign another big deal. So, I hope he gets as much as he could get. I have no idea what the Titans salary cap situation is. I don't follow that closely. I'm just being honest, but I would make every effort that I could to get someone like DeAndre Hopkins, because I think he could help Will Levis as well as the receiver room.
Yeah, the financials are restrictive, and certainly for a lot of teams this time of year, Greg, we're just, it's the middle of June, the money's spent and it's rare that we have a player of Hopkins' caliber that's out on the market at this time.
Nobody has $20 million just hanging around right now on their salary cap.
Unfortunately for DeAndre Hopkins, no, they certainly don't. But they, based on everything that I've heard and everybody that I've talked to here locally, I can't speak for New England, but I know that they have made every effort to try and entice DeAndre Hopkins to the idea of Nashville. So now at this point, it's just kind of a wait and see. For, New England or Tennessee, I assume that the market will will have at least a few more teams interested in him before training camp ultimately comes down for these teams, Greg. But is there a place that you would, between those two, New England and the Titans, is there a place that you might rather see DeAndre Hopkins, just in terms of fit, skill set, personnel, quarterback? Is there one that's more intriguing to you than the other?
Well, I think he fits anywhere, but the one thing we don't know, and you may know more than I, because I'm not there, and I don't know if you've had conversation, but you know that this offense is going to, I'm talking Tennessee now, obviously, is going to have some differences from the previous coordinator. Now, that doesn't mean that Derrick Henry is not going to carry the ball 18 or 20 times a game, but there's different ways to run the ball. There's different ways to combine your run game and your pass game. There's many ways to play and win in the National Football League. So we know, I don't know what Tim Kelly is exactly going to do, and again, maybe no one knows that for sure. Someone might have a better idea than I. Obviously, Tim Kelly spent a lot of time in Houston with Bill O'Brien. You're going to see empty sets. Bill O'Brien was a big believer in that. Tim Kelly will certainly incorporate that into the offense. But as far as what the overall pass game will look like in terms of route concepts and route design, there'll be some differences for sure. I'm sure he's also going to be very conscious about helping the offensive line, because the offensive line is a work in progress. I mean, obviously, as we discussed in our live podcast at the Hutton Hotel in the Analog Room, they need Dillard to be the left tackle and Skoronski to be the left guard. That's what they really need. Whether it plays out that way, only time will tell. But given that Dillard will be starting for the first time as a full-time starter, and Skoronski's a rookie, no matter how efficient he was in college, he's a rookie, and the right tackle's only going into his second year. And as we speak today, the center is going to be a starter at center for the first time in his career in the NFL. You also have to think about how you help your offensive line be efficient. So there's a lot of things that go into putting together a pass game. And obviously Tim Kelly does have meaningful NFL experience. So these are the things they're working through. This is what the offseason is for. We don't have the answers right now on June 21st, June 22nd. We don't have those answers. They may not have those answers yet either. They have to go through training camp to really get the answers.
Well, that was just what I was getting ready to point out, Greg, and talking to not just Will Levis and some of the other players, but Mike Vrabel, the idea of making new mistakes, not just as players, but as coaches, right? That this past, couple of phases of the offseason before we head into training camp, it's the opportunity for the coaching staff to try some things that they might not necessarily implement during training camp, but this is their opportunity. This is their time period to find out.
You almost want to make mistakes now. Let me tell you a very quick story. Obviously, Ron Jaworski's one of my best friends. We worked together for years and years and years. And he'd been in the league 7 years when Dick Vermeil with the Eagles in 1980 brought Sid Gilman in, who was well known as kind of the father of the modern day passing game. And older people listening might remember Sid Gilman. But Gilman was way ahead of his time when it came to pretty much everything with the passing game: route concepts, protections, timing, rhythm, anticipation. He was way ahead of his time. And I remember Jaws telling me that in that training camp of 1980, Sid Gilman would say to him, "Jaws, I want you to try things in training camp. I don't care if you throw 5 interceptions in a practice. You need to know what you can do, what you can't do, what you feel comfortable doing, what you see. Maybe you're not seeing it the way you think you are. Maybe you're seeing it better than you think you are. Do all those things in training camp. I don't care about the results. We've got the process has to work itself out so that when we get to the games, you have no questions in your mind as to what you can do." And I've never forgot that story, and that's kind of what, how it is now with everybody on the sideline with Twitter and their phones. Oh, Will Levis threw a bad ball. That means he stinks. Oh, Will Levis threw a good ball. Oh, well, I really like what I'm seeing. You got to be careful about using that, and I know this is the way of the world now. I'm not ripping the people who do it. We all live on Twitter, and that's just life in the big city these days. But from a football perspective, you want young players to go through tough times early on in training camp, in practice, to figure out what they can do and what they can't do.
No, I was just to your last point about social media and how that's being presented in a way that it may not be necessarily accurate, even though you think you're seeing what you're seeing in real time. For example, Ryan Tannehill threw a touchdown pass to Chigakonkwo the other day at practice. Amani Hooker was the closest defensive back in coverage, and it looked like Chig had beaten him over the top. I asked Chig about that after practice, and he's saying, no, that's not Amani's responsibility.
Right,
They're
right.
number 2 in that situation.
Right.
And I'm sitting there looking around and like, oh, well, then I'm glad I didn't ask you that in a public setting. Just trying to get what's going on here. Because from my vantage point, I think I know what I'm seeing until I talk to somebody, and then all of a sudden I very much don't.
And one of the things that, I sit here, I watch tape all the time, and my intern from the matchup show this past season has stayed in Philadelphia, and he's been coming in and watching tape with me because, he wants to be in the business. Because I've had 3-4 guys who've been interns on my matchup show and have worked on the matchup show. They're now in the league, as scouts. And that's what this young man wants to do. So, he comes in and we watch tape together and we talk. And, I always say just what you said. I say, I just wish I knew how that was coached. I wish I knew how they asked him to read that exactly, what they asked him to specifically look at. I think I know, and I'm looking at my screen right now. That's why I turned my head. So I think I know, but I can't know 100% with certainty, and that's always frustrating for me, but, and believe me, it's not an egotistical statement, but I know just from what I've done for years and years that I probably know more than the average person, but there's certain things I just can't know.
Right. And that I think is the best lesson that we could close the podcast with on this first one back in the last couple of weeks. But obviously there's going to continue to be interesting discussions and storylines around the NFL. We'll keep an eye on the Deandre Hopkins situation. Greg and I have had this time off, so there's a lot of different news and notes from mini camp and OTAs to go through with some of the new players and new additions to the Titans roster. And buddy, I'm glad to be back doing this live. This is
I missed you, Buck, man. I thought you forgot about me. I thought, I thought our love affair was over,
Greg, listen to me. I'm talking in too many places for anybody to miss me for any period of time at all. But I'm grateful.
You didn't go to Bonnaroo, did you?
I sure as hell did, Greg.
Oh, you're out of your mind.
No, Greg, it's the first time, and I know you're a music guy, and we'll have to do
But I don't do the stuff where you have to like sleep outside or that kind of stuff.
Well, I got a day pass, Greg. I was in and out. I was cooking, and it was the experience of a lifetime. I'm so glad that I went, but I would not be that happy if I camped. You are exactly right.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. But because how far is that from Nashville?
About an hour, Manchester, Tennessee.
Got it.
Talking about doing the radio show live from Bonnaroo next year, Greg. So if you're in town, you can come out to the farm with me.
Did you go to the CMAs, the music fest?
I did go to a night. I only did one night of CMAs, and I did one night of Bonnaroo this year.
Good for you. The CMAs, see, you can actually sit down at the CMAs. I'm an old guy, Buck. I need to actually go and sit down.
That's okay. I completely understand, Greg. We got music for all kinds down here.
Right.
But buddy, it's always great to have you back. It's great to be back with the audience, and certainly we'll do it again next Wednesday here on The Install. See you, buddy.